To follow along with the written version of this pattern and download the interactive PDF, use the links on screen now, in the description below, or by going to clubcrochet.com/seal. Hey there, it's Louie, and in this video, we're gonna be making Bub the Beginner Seal Pup. It's so cute. This pattern is designed as a crash course in crochet. So if you've never crocheted before in your life, this is a great one to get started with. This is part of our new series of patterns called Amigurumi. You can see some of them on screen now. These are all patterns themed around beaches and the shores. And if you wanna find more of our designs, some of which are not seen on screen and some are coming and they're mysteries, you can find them all at clubcrochet.com/Sandy. I really like this season. I think you're gonna like it a lot too. But for this video, we're gonna be making our little tiny seal, and this is a crash course in crochet. So this video is designed so that if you don't know how to crochet at all, you can get started with it. However, if you are a complete beginner and you want extra help beyond this, we have a 101 series that you can find at crocheting101.com. There's a left-handed version of this video available. There's also a more abridged version of this video, so if you're more of an advanced crocheter, you don't need to learn the basics, check out that video instead. All of the links for everything I'm talking about you can find in the description down below. If you're a complete beginner and you need extra help beyond all that, you can check out the Discord channel and Facebook group. Those are great places to ask questions to get help if you need it. You can also join the live crochet alongs. I do a live crochet along every single week where I'll crochet something from this library live with you. You can join those live crochet alongs, ask questions if you get stuck, or just hang out with some like-minded crocheters. You can join those by just liking down below, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the little bell icon so you don't miss it when we come out with new videos. There are also time codes to quickly jump around in this video, so you can jump straight to making the fins or making the tail. It makes it a little easier to, if you want to keep jumping back to. All those are also linked in the description. The last thing I want to say is check out the end of this video so you can see a preview of one of our new patterns in our new Amigurumi kit. I'm also looking for testers for this new pattern, so if you want to check that out, just watch to the end of the video. Okay, the very last thing I want to talk about is all the materials that you need to crochet this pattern along with me. The first thing that you're gonna need is a crochet hook. I'm gonna be using a size G 4mm crochet hook in this video. It's just my favorite hook to use with the yarn we're gonna be using. For the yarn, we're gonna be using my special Amigurumi cotton yarn, worsted weight cotton yarn from Club Crochet. That's us. We're gonna be using the colors gray as your main color. You'll need a very, very small amount of black for the nose and a very small amount of white for the eyes if you want to for the eyes. That's not really necessary, but it does make it look kind of cute. You also might want some other yarn and some other colors to just use as like stitch markers and stuff, but you can really use anything you want for that. Outside of the yarn and crochet hook, you'll also need a pair of scissors for cutting stuff. You'll need a darning needle to help sew in stitches. I like using a little crimped end darning needle like this. It helps you get in and out of hard to reach stitches a little bit easier. And you'll also need some safety eyes. I'm gonna be using 8mm, I believe 8mm safety eyes in this video. They might be 10mm actually now that I'm looking at it, but I think they're 8mm safety eyes. But you can use anywhere between 6 to 10mm. You can even go higher if you want to make really big, cute eyes. It's all a matter of what you want to do with your crochet. And then the very last thing is you want some stuffing. All right, so the last thing I want to say before we get going is thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot to me. Please like down below, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support the channel, check out our website, clubcrochet.com. There's so many more patterns there, merch, kits. We have this really cool Amigurumi kit that goes along with this pattern. So check it all out at clubcrochet.com. All right, well, let's get hooking. All right, to get started for our seal, we're gonna start by making one of these, which is gonna be the fins. And it actually is gonna start us off with some more complex stitches actually in crochet, but they're really not that complicated, and it's gonna be really good to get you a crash course into how to hold the yarn and how stitches work in general before we get started in working in the round and in a spiral. So what we wanna start by doing is creating 2 of these little fins. To get started, we're gonna start with our gray yarn here, and we're going to start by making what's called a slip knot. For a slip knot, we're going to take the end with the tail end right here, and we're going to fold it over the long end attached to the ball. That's going to be this end over here. And we're going to create a little hole, loop like that. Now we're going to pinch that loop in the center and fold that over the long end attached to the ball of yarn, and then grab that long end from inside the loop and pinch it, and then pinch the tail end here like that and pull it through. That's going to create this little loop at the end of our crochet hook. This is what's called a slip knot. What's really cool about the slip knot is we can take our crochet hook and place it into the slip knot here, and when we pull the end attached to the ball of yarn, it should tighten the loop up, but when we pull the other end, it shouldn't tighten the loop up at all. Now what we want to do is pull it tight against the crochet hook, but not so tight that it's like strangling the crochet hook. You still want to have some movement like this in your crochet hook. All right. Now let's talk about how to hold the hook and the yarn. For holding the hook, I like to use what's called the spoon grip, which is where you hold it like you're using a spoon. Or a knife is another way people say to hold the hook. I like to hold it just like this, right? So my thumb is on the little pad right here to hold onto and give a little bit more grip. Sometimes I like to choke up a little bit higher on the crochet hook so my fingers are right up against the top so I can help work loops around my hook a little bit easier. With the yarn hand, we're going to take the end attached to the ball and place it in between your pinky, ring, and middle finger like this, and have it go around your index finger like that. The idea here is you want to have your index finger and thumb open for pinching, so that way you can pinch the base of your work, and it'll help you get more leverage with your crochet hook and the yarn in general. And see, we're going to be working with this end that's right over your finger like that. Okay, so we're going to start by creating chains. For a chain, it's essentially just grabbing onto the yarn, yarning over the crochet hook to place it onto the hook, and then pulling that through the loop that's currently on the hook. That's what a chain stitch is, and it's kind of the basis of all of crochet. So we're going to start by yarning over the crochet hook like that, and then notice how I'm holding it with my 3 fingers. I'm having to go around my index finger, so my index finger and thumb are open to pinch the very base of my piece right here, right where the loop is coming over the crochet hook. Now with the hook, I want to pull it through the loop that's currently on the hook, and the best way to do that is kind of twist it to line it up with the hole. See how I'm kind of twisting the hook, lining it up with the hole, and then I'm going to scoop it through. Scooping is the easiest way to make sure you get all the stitches through and you don't accidentally split your yarn, which is when you pull just a piece of your yarn through the hook. Or through the loops rather. All right, so that's going to be one chain. We're going to start the fins by creating 5 of those chains. And notice how I'm like holding everything nice and pretty taut. You know, I don't want it to be really, really tight because then it's really hard to work into my stitches. And I don't want it really loose like this because then it's going to be too loose and it's going to create a very loose fin. So I want it to be somewhere in between where it's just about that. So my crochet hook can move freely in the loop. So it's not too tight, but it's not so loose that my hook is like coming out. Like, notice how it's got, like, well, that's way too loose. Okay, so we're gonna have it right in between there. We've done one chain. We want to do 5 of those chains. So let's do one more. We're gonna yarn over the crochet hook, and then I'm gonna take my fingers, pinch right under where the loop is, twist the hook to line up with the hole, and scoop it through. That's gonna be 2 chains. You can count your chains by counting those little V's. See, 1 and 2 like that. So there's 1, 2. We want 5. So I'm going to adjust my grip to be just under the loop, yarn over with my crochet hook, and then scoop it through like that. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 4. And then one more will be 5. All right, now normally I would teach you how to do something called the single crochet, which is the base of all crochet stitches. However, this pattern is actually starting with the next level up from a single crochet, which is called a half double crochet. It just has one additional step to the stitch. We will be learning the single crochet a little later on when we create the body of our piece, but we're creating just the fins right now, so we just want to create what's called the half double crochet. It's a really weird name. Don't worry about the name. It's complicated, and I'll explain it later. But for the half double crochet, we are going to start our piece by yarning over the crochet hook. So yarn over the crochet hook first. And we're going to place it off to the side like this to get our fingers into its pinch-in position. Next, we're going to skip 2 of these chains. So as we said before, here, let me just show you the anatomy of a chain stitch. So here you can see all of our chains. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is where this loop is coming out. We want to start this piece by skipping these first 2 chains. and then we're going to work into the third chain, which is going to be right here. Now there's a bunch of different places you can work into a chain actually. The normal place that people usually work into chains is going to be the top loop right here, which is totally valid. You can very much use that loop for your pieces. However, this is a little pro tip. I find that these fins and most crochet in general looks a little bit better when you crochet into the back loop of a chain, which is the loop on the back of the chain right there. It's kind of like this little spine loop. So what we're going to do with our crochet hook this time is we're going to skip these first two. The first one is kind of under that yarn there. See, 1 and then 2, and we're going to work into the third chain from the hook. You can also count it backwards, 1, 2, 3, up from the start because there's 5 chains. Okay, so we're going to get our crochet hook into this back loop. Again, that's just a little pro tip. It's not necessary, but it does help to make this a little bit cleaner of an edge. Okay, so sometimes I like to do this where I place my needle into the place where I want my crochet hook first, and then I'll get my crochet hook prepared. I'll yarn over the hook, and we're going to place that right where this needle is. So I'm going to take that needle out, and now we're going to take our crochet hook. It's easiest to get into that back bump by placing the hook right where that back bump is like this, and then using my nail to help kind of pry the bump and wiggle my hook into that chain like that. All right, once we're in the chain, we can yarn over our crochet hook and pull it through that chain by twisting and scooping it through. Now for a half double crochet here, you're going to see we have 3 loops on the hook, 1, 2, and 3, because we yarned over, that's going to be this middle one here, and then we went into the stitch and yarned over and pulled through, that's going to be that third one right there. So we have 3 loops on the hook. For a half double crochet, what we do is we yarn over and we pull it through all 3 of those loops at the same time. The easiest way to do that is just to take it 1 stitch at a time and use that scooping and twisting method like we've been doing for the chains. So we twist the hook to line up with the hole, and we scoop it through 1 stitch at a time. There's 1 and 2 and 3. We want to get through all 3 of those. And there you go. You made your very first actual crochet stitch called the half double crochet. It looks kind of like that. All right, next after that half double crochet, we're going to work something called a double crochet into the next stitch over. And as you can probably imagine, it's going to be slightly bigger than the half double crochet. Essentially, with crochet stitches, the names of them are talking about the height of them. So this is a half double crochet. A single crochet, which we're going to make later, is a little bit smaller. It's about that big. And then the double crochet is going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit taller like that. To make the double crochet, we want to start it the exact same way as we started the half double crochet. We yarn over our crochet hook first. Then we're going to insert into the stitch. Again, we're going to work into the back bump of the chain as our stitch. So we're going to take our crochet hook, and notice how I'm like holding it really taut, really close. Place it right where that bump is, and we're going to take our fingernail to help pry the hook into that back bump. Now we can yarn over the stitch or over the hook, and we're going to pull it just through that back bump like that. And now again, you should have 3 loops on the hook, 1, 2, and 3. For a double crochet, instead of yarning over and pulling through all 3 like we did for the half double crochet, we want to only do 2 of the stitches. And then we're going to yarn over again and pull through the last 2 stitches. So we're going to yarn over our crochet hook, and now we're going to pull it just through these first 2. So we're going to twist, scoop through 1 and 2 like that. So just through those first 2. Now you still have 2 loops on the hook. We can yarn over our crochet hook again. So yarn it over the hook, and then we're going to pull through these other 2 loops for another stitch. So 1 and 2 like that. All right, that's going to be our double crochet. And you can see how it's a little bit taller than the half double. See how we're making kind of a big triangle here. All right, for our last stitch of the fins, we're going to work a triple crochet, which you can probably imagine is 1 more step from the double crochet. So it's just going to be another additional step. It's not too complicated though, especially once you've already done a double crochet. What we want to do is yarn over our crochet hook 2 times. So this time we're going to go over the crochet hook once, and then again over the crochet hook again. So it's going to be 2 times over the hook first. Then we can work our crochet hook into the chain. Again, we're going to work into that last back bump. You can kind of see me holding really close right there. That last little bump is where we want to get our crochet hook. So we're going to place it right where that bump is, and then use our nail to help guide that into the hook. Now this one's the hardest one to work into. I just kind of get it ready, and then I wiggle my way into the chain like that. Now we're going to yarn over our crochet hook once we're under that back bump and pull it through that chain. So we're going to scoop through like that. Okay, now you're going to have 4 loops on the hook. 1, 2, 3, and 4. What we want to do for a triple crochet is we want to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through another 2, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2. So it's 3 steps, hence the triple name. So we're going to yarn over a crochet hook first and pull through just these first 2 loops. 1 and 2. Then we can yarn over again onto our crochet hook and pull through the next 2 loops. 1 and 2, like that. Notice how I'm keeping everything nice and taut. I'm using my fingers to keep right at the base of where that loop is coming out. It just helps keep everything really, so it's not getting too loose and too crazy. And we're going to do our last one. Yarn over the crochet hook, get into the pinching position right into those loops, and pull through those last 2. 1 and 2, like that. All right. That's going to be the last stitch for our fin. But next, to finish this fin up, we want to just create 1 chain. Remember the chains from the very beginning. Is we're going to create 1 more of those. So we yarn over our crochet hook, pull it through the loop on the hook like that. All right. To finish these up, we're going to cut the yarn. You don't need a very long end. That's probably just about fine. Maybe about like, I don't know, 5 or so inches. And we can just pull that all the way through the loop like this. Just pull it all the way through. That's going to create a little knot at the end. And now you should have 2 little knots, and this is going to be our fins. We want to make 2 of these fins. They're going to be made exactly the same, and it'll look something like this. Now notice how they have a bit of a curve to it. Keep note of that. We're going to have this curve facing a very specific way when we sew this onto the body way later on. Okay, so there are your fins done. Next up, we're going to create the tail of our piece, which is also going to be a little complicated, but now that we know the basics of this fin, we're going to learn some new techniques and some new stitches for the tail. The tail is going to be made very similar to the way that we made the fins. We're going to start with a slip knot, just like how we made the fins. So we're going to fold a loop over itself like that, pinch the inside, and pull it through to create a slip knot. We're going to take our crochet hook, go into that slip knot and pull it tight. And this time for our tail, instead of chaining 5 like we did for the fins, we want to chain 6. So we'll yarn over our crochet hook and chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, like our fins, we're going to work only in those back bumps of the chains just to make it a little cleaner. And the start of this is going to be exactly the same as we did for the fins. We're going to skip those first 2 bumps and do a half double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook. For a half double crochet, again, we yarn over our crochet hook first, then we skip our 2 back bumps and we work into the 3rd. So we're going to take our crochet hook, place it right where that 3rd bump is, and kind of use our nail to help pry our hook into that bump. Like that. And now that we're in the chain, we can yarn over our crochet hook, pull it through the bump like that, and you'll have 3 loops on the hook, 1, 2, 3. And we're going to finish our half double crochet by yarning over our crochet hook and pulling through all 3 of those. We'll just do 1 at a time though. 1, 2, and 3, like that. All right, there's our half double crochet. Our next stitch is going to be the same as the fin. We're going to do a double crochet into the next chain. So we'll yarn over our hook, go into the back bump there, kind of pry it open with our crochet hook, yarn over, pull it under the bump, and now we want to pull through just 2 of those loops. So we yarn over, pull through just 2, 1 and 2, and then yarn over again and pull through the last 2, 1 and 2. And there's going to be your double crochet. Now notice how I'm consistently keeping a very close grip on everything. It helps me keep everything in place and at the same gauge, which means that how tight the crochet stitches are about going to be the same, because I'm consistently changing my grip to be close to it to keep everything really nice and secure. All right, now that we've done 1 half double crochet and 1 double crochet, we want to do another half double crochet into the next chain. So we're not doing a triple crochet this time. This time we're doing a half double crochet again. So we yarn over our stitch, or over our hook just once. Then we're going to go into the stitch, aka the chain's back bump right there. yarn over our crochet hook again and pull it under that bump. Now you have those 3 loops on the hook. We want to pull through all 3 of them with a new loop. Yarn over our hook, and we're going to do one at a time. 1, 2, and 3, like that. All right, there's going to be your 3rd stitch, your half double crochet. Now for the last chain right here, we want to do a slip stitch into that very last chain. So we take our crochet hook, we're going to go right into that chain. We don't need to yarn over at all. This time we can just go straight into the chain, and then we can yarn over and pull it through the stitch. And then we'll take that same loop still on the hook and pull it all the way through the other loop on the hook, like that. That's going to create what we call a slip stitch, which kind of just pulls it really tightly. It's basically the smallest stitch you can make in crochet. All right, so that's going to be the first half of the tail. And you can kind of see how it makes this cute little, like, I don't know, almost looks like a tongue. All right, so that's going to be the first half of the fin. We're going to do this basically again while it's still connected. We're going to, for row 2 is what we're going to call this, we're going to chain 5. So we're going to yarn over our hook and pull it through the loop to create a chain. There's 1, yarn over, pull it through the hook, 2, 3, there's 4, and 5. So you should have 5 chains now on the hook, just like that. Okay, now we're going to basically make another one of these fins all the way down to the bottom. We're going to skip those 2 chains and do a half double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook, but again, we're working into those back bumps, the ones along the outside. We'll yarn over our hook first, then we'll skip our 2, 1 and 2, and into the 3rd chain from the hook right here, we're going to do a half double crochet. So we get into that stitch, yarn over again, pull it through the chain, then yarn over again and pull through all 3 of those loops. 1, 2, and 3, like that. That's going to create your first half double crochet in row 2. Next, we're going to do a double crochet into the next one. So we'll yarn over, go into that next chain right here. Oops, let's try that one again. There we go. I just didn't want to break my yarn by accident. And then we can yarn over, pull it through that chain. Then we're doing a double crochet here, so we want to start by yarning over and pulling through just 2 of those loops, 1 and 2. Then we're going to yarn over again and pull through just 2 of those loops, 1 and 2, like that. And there's your double crochet. Next, we want to do a half double crochet in the next chain, and the next one's kind of weird. You can kind of see it if you tilt it back. You can see that little loop right there. That's the one we want to do half double crochet. So we yarn over first, then we're going to get into that chain. I just place it right where that is, and then I'm going to kind of pry it over with our hook. And yarn over, pull it through that chain. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over again, and pull through all 3. 1, 2, and 3, like so, to create our half double crochet. Our very last stitch for our tail, right where this other end is, so where we did our first slip stitch right there with our needle, I placed, that's going to be another slip stitch right into the same spot. So we'll take our hook, go into that same spot, again right there, you can kind of see my finger poking through, yarn over, pull it through the stitch, and then through the loop on the hook to create another slip stitch. To finish this up, we want to chain 1. So we'll yarn over with the end attached to the ball, pull it through the loop on the hook to create a chain. Now we can cut the yarn. You don't need to leave a very long end. That's probably fine. And we'll just take this end and pull it all the way through like that to create a knot at the end. And that's going to be how to make your tail. Now usually when I make my tail, you can kind of see how it has like a bit of a curve to it. I usually like to kind of fix that curve by kind of pinching it and skewing it and stretching it a little bit more, just so that it looks a little bit more like maybe like a Y, like that. There we go. And that's going to be how to make your tail. Okay, so now we've got 2 fins and a tail. The last thing we want to make before we get working on the body is we want to make the muzzle of your seal. To make the muzzle, we're going to learn a new technique called the magic loop method. Now the magic loop is what I normally use for crochet pretty often to get started in my crochet. Usually in Amigurumi, you don't need to create those chains, except for when you're making little pieces that need to be sewn on. But for the most part, you make a magic loop to get started in crochet. So I'm excited to show you how to do that. Now, I do have a video tutorial that I'll link up here that'll go through a few different ways I like to make the magic loop, but this is my favorite way and my favorite method. I take the yarn with my dominant hand. Here, I'll place the crochet hook down for a second. Take my yarn with my dominant hand facing downwards towards the ground and pinch it with my non-dominant middle finger and thumb like that, okay? And we're gonna pull in with my ring and pinky. I just kind of hold that tail end off to the side. Now with my index and middle finger out, we're gonna go around it 2 times. We're looking to create an X on the front towards you and 2 parallel lines on the back away from you. Once you've done that, you can take your ring finger and just grab that yarn in to hold it off to the side, like so. Okay, now with our crochet hook in hand, in our dominant hand, and the back of your hand facing you, so those 2 parallel lines are facing you, we're gonna take our crochet hook and we'll go under that first bar and then hook onto the second one. Pull that second one under the first one and then loop it around like that, which will create a little loop at the end of your crochet hook. Now we're gonna go over this first bar and hook onto the second one. So I go over it and then I yarn over. I kind of like to use my index finger to guide it over my hook like that to get it hooked on. Once you've got it hooked, you wanna create a chain by twisting to line up with the hole and scooping to make sure you get under all those stitches. That's gonna create a little chain which will lock everything in place. You can pull it off of your fingers now, and now you've made something called a magic loop. What's cool about the magic loop is when you pull this tail end, it'll tighten this magic loop up like that. So we want to pull it just a little tighter so it's maybe about the size of a dime, about that big's good. And what we're going to do is we're going to work our first set of stitches into the center of this magic loop. So as if that center of the loop is a chain itself, we're going to work all of our stitches into that. To start our muzzle, we're actually going to start by chaining 1 more time. So you want 2 chains to start the muzzle. We've already done 1 chain to get the magic loop started. We can yarn over again and pull it through the hook or through the loop to create a second chain. That's going to create just a little bit taller of a stitch. Now our first stitch for the muzzle, again worked into the center of our magic loop as if it's one of the chains, we're going to start with a double crochet. For a double crochet, we'll yarn over first, and then we're going to insert the tip of our crochet hook into the stitch. In this case, it's going to be the hole itself. So go into the hole. We'll yarn over again onto our crochet hook and pull that under the stitch like that. Now we have 3 loops on the hook, just like how when we were doing our fin. This time we only want to yarn over again like that, grip right under it, and we're going to just pull through 2 of these loops, just 2 of them. 1 and 2. Then we can yarn over again and pull through those last 2 loops. 1 and 2. All right, and that's going to be our first double crochet for our muzzle. Next, we're going to do a half double crochet into the center. So we've made these before. We're going to yarn over first, then go into the center of the magic loop and yarn over again, pull that under, and you'll have those 3 loops on the hook. This time we'll yarn over, and we're going to pull through all 3, 1, 2, and 3 at the same time. 1, 2, and 3. There's our half double. All right, now we're going to make a single crochet, which is actually normally the main stitch I use for crochet. So it's kind of funny that we're learning the single crochet now. We're going to use it a lot more in this pattern though. For single crochet, you're going to find it a lot easier now that you already know the double and half double. It kind of like threw you into the deep end a bit. So for a single crochet, we're going to start, we don't have to yarn over our stitch first. Now we can, instead of yarning over, we can just go directly into the stitch itself and then yarn over and pull a loop under the stitch. Now you'll have 2 loops on the hook. We can yarn over again, and we want to just pull through those 2 loops, 1 and 2 like that. And that's a single crochet. So it's about the half of the size of a double crochet, which is why you call it a single crochet. And the half double crochet is called that because it's about in between a single and a double. So they call it a half double. Now, personally, I do not like the name of a half double crochet, but it's the way it is. So it's called a half double. Speaking of, we're going to do a half double crochet after we've done our single. So let's do another half double crochet, yarn over into the stitch, yarn over again and pull it through, then yarn over, and we're going to pull through 3. 1, 2, and 3. And then finally, we want to do 1 more double crochet into the magic loop. So we yarn over into the stitch, yarn over and pull it under, and you have 3 loops. This time we're doing a double crochet, so we yarn over again, pull through just 2 loops, 1 and 2. Then we'll yarn over again and pull through the last 2, 1 and 2, like that. All right. Lastly, we want to chain 1, so we yarn over, pull it through to create a chain, and then we want to slip stitch 1 right into the center of this magic loop. So we go into the center, yarn over, pull it under, and then pull that same loop through the loop on the hook, like that, to create a slip knot, or sorry, slip stitch. We can cut our yarn now. Don't pull anything tight, just cut your yarn, like that. And we'll just pull this all the way through our loop. And then I like to take this tail end and just put it right back in to the center of that magic loop. So right back into the center like that. And then we can take this other tail end here and we'll pull this nice and tight, which is going to tighten that loop up. And then we'll pull this other tail end here and pull that nice and tight. And we're just going to pull both of these tight. Usually I like to kind of grab it. See how I'm like grabbing it right at the base here? I'll grab it right there and I'll just pull. First I'll pull one and then I'll pull the other. You just want to make sure they're tight. And then I kind of fold it around like that to make sure that it looks like there's two, kind of like a little, kind of like a mini little heart when it's upside down like that. So this is going to be sewn onto the face this way, like this. So you can kind of see how it's a little muzzle, like that. See? So this is going to be sewn right onto the face. Okay, so now we've got all of our pieces done. We've got our fin, we've got our tail, we've got our muzzle, and we can finally start working on the body of our piece. All right, for our body, we're going to do another magic loop. So we're going to start exactly like we did for the muzzle. We're going to create a little magic loop. Let's do it really nice and quick here. There we go. Pull it about the size of a dime-ish. And there we go. All right. Now, the body is going to be worked in the round, which means we're just going to keep working around in a spiral over and over with our stitches working into our other stitches. We're going to start by doing 6 single crochets into the center of the magic loop. Now again, a single crochet, which we made in the center of our muzzle, is going to just be, you go take your crochet hook, go into the very center of the magic loop there, yarn over with the end attached to the ball, and pull it under the center. You'll have your 2 loops on the hook. Going over the stitch, we'll yarn over again and pull through those 2 loops, 1 and 2 like that. That's going to be our single crochet. We want to make 6 of those into the center of the magic loop. So there's 1 into the center, pull it under, going over, pull through 2, 1 and 2. So there's 1, 2. Let's keep going. There's 3. And I'll start to go quicker. There's 4. And notice how I'm keeping a pretty tight grip. I want all of these stitches to look pretty similar, and so they're not too tall and away from each other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more will be 6. Now the way I'm counting my stitches, by the way, I'm looking at the edge of my stitches here. See that V? That's how I'm counting these. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, now before I pull our little tail end here to close this magic loop up and get started into round 2, what we want to do is take a little bit of yarn in a separate color. So we're going to just do pink here, and this is going to be what we use for our stitch marker, which is a great way to keep track of where the ends of the rounds are. Because we're working in a spiral without turning, it can be kind of hard to see and find where the end of your round is if you don't do something like this. Now you can use regular stitch markers, and just a regular stitch marker, you can just, it kind of looks like a safety pin, and you just place this around the last stitch. But I find it's a little easier to use a little strand of yarn. So I'm going to place this yarn right into the center first, and I'll hold it down with my other hand as I pull our magic loop tight around that stitch marker. So I'm just going to pull it nice and tight around that, like that. And we're going to take this tail end here from the very beginning, just place it over. We're going to take this end attached to our stitch marker. We're just going to fold it over our piece like that, and it's going to create this little line. And we're just going to kind of ignore it as we go. I'm also going to cut this a little shorter. This is a little long for a stitch marker, so maybe about that long is fine. We're just going to kind of ignore this as we go in our piece. I usually like to just hold it in my dominant hand with my crochet hook usually, So I just kind of ignore it and it's away from me. Okay. All right, so that's going to be the end of round 1. Now for round 2, we're going to be starting to work into the stitches to create a larger and larger piece. We're going to start by working into the first single crochet that we made. And when we work into single crochets, I want to show you the anatomy basically of a stitch here. So if you look at the top of your stitch here, you're going to see that there's these 2 loops. There's one here, there's one here. That's called the front loop, which is the one closest to you like that. And the back loop is the one furthest from you right there. So front loop and back loop. Now sometimes I say crochet only in the front loop only. That's going to be not really used in this pattern, but it's very useful to use for different parts of the pattern. In this pattern though, we're going to take our crochet hook, pretend this needle is the hook, and we're going to go under both of these loops at the same time. So we're going to make our crochet hook go under both of those. And that's where we're going to work our stitches. So when we do a single crochet, like how we worked into the magic loop, we're going to work under both of those loops at the same time. So we want to start by getting our crochet hook in place. And the first stitch for our magic loop, or for our second round, is going to be kind of difficult to find, but you want to count back from where this loop is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This first one can be kind of hard to get into. I like to take my crochet hook right at the base of it and wiggle my way into that chain, or into that stitch, instead of like forcing my way in. I just kind of wiggle it till it's into that stitch, just like that. For our first stitch of round 2, we want to do an increase stitch. In fact, all of our stitches in round 2 are going to be called an increase stitch. An increase simply means 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So you could say that round 1 was 3 increase stitches because you did 6 stitches in the magic loop, so you did a bunch of stitches into the magic loop. Now this stitch, we're going to do 2 single crochets into that same stitch that we already got our crochet hook into. We're going to take our tail end, attach the ball, pull it through the loop or through the stitch by twisting. This is the hardest part here. You want to twist it to line up with the hole and really scoop it through. That first stitch specifically can be really hard to work into. So really twist and scoop to get through that to make sure you're under all of it. Now once you're pulled through that stitch, we can yarn over again and pull through those 2 loops. 1 and 2, like that. That's going to be our first single crochet. Now our second single crochet is going to be in the same exact place as our first one was. That's going to be what makes it an increase. It basically adds stitches to your piece. So every time you're increasing, you're making your piece a little bit bigger and bigger. So our crochet hook for our second stitch is going to be in the exact same place as we put our first stitch. The easiest way to find that is to kind of follow, see where that loop is coming out right there, and see how it's got this little V. If you poke right to the base of that V right there, that's going to be the same stitch you just worked into. So that's where we want to place our crochet hook for our second single crochet of our first increase. So take our crochet hook right where that V goes, and I like to just kind of place it in place and then again just wiggle till it goes into the stitch. Then we'll yarn over the stitch and hook onto the yarn, and we're going to twist and scoop to make sure you get under that full stitch. And then once we're over it, we yarn over again, and we're going to pull through 2, 1 and 2, like that. Okay, that's going to be our first increase stitch. So that's 2 single crochets into 1 stitch. That's called an increase. All right, next we want to do another increase. We want to do 6 increases total, which is going to bring your stitch count up from 6 stitches, which is what you had in round 1. So if you counted all your stitches around, you should have had 6 in round 1. In round 2, because we're doing 2 single crochets into every single stitch around, you're going to increase up from 6 to 12 stitches around. So let's go into our next stitch. Take a crochet hook. Our next stitch over, again, if you follow where this loop is coming out, you'll find the same stitch you just worked into, which is the easiest way to find the next stitch. So if you follow that V, 1, 2, you'll find that stitch right there. That's the same one we just worked into. Our next stitch is going to be right here. The next 2 loops right there. That's where we want to place our crochet hook. So we'll take our crochet hook, go under those 2 loops, 1 and 2. We're going to yarn over with the end attached to the ball and pull it under by twisting it and scooping it. And before we yarn over and pull through those 2 loops, here's a little pro tip. See this tail end here? This is going to get in the way, and it could come undone if we're not careful. So what we like to do is we're going to take this tail end and we're going to place it over the end attached to the ball right here and these 2 loops on the hook, and we're going to crochet around it. And it's going to hide this tail end into our piece as we crochet. It's just going to save us some time later on. So we go over, here's our tail end again, between these two loops on our hook and the end attached to the ball here. And then once it's between those, just like that, we could take our end attached to the ball, yarn over, and then finish our single crochet around that tail end and just kind of ignore it. So there's 1 and 2. That's going to be our second, or the first single crochet of our second increase, aka our third single crochet total. All right, for our fourth single crochet, it's going to go into the same exact stitch because we're making another increase. So follow that V down into that stitch right here, just like this. Yarn over, pull it under that stitch, and going over it, we'll yarn over again and pull through 2. Notice how I'm ignoring our tail end here. Once you get it started working around our tail end, it can be pretty easy to ignore. So there's 1 and 2. That's our second increase finished. We want to do 6 increases total, so let's go into the next stitch. Notice those 2 V's there. We want to go under each one. There's 1 and 2. Place our tail end over our crochet hook as well. Then yarn over the crochet hook with the end attached to the ball. Hook onto it and twist and scoop it through that single crochet. Going over it, yarn over again and pull through 2. 1 and 2. All right, there's our first single crochet of our third increase. Let's do another one into the same stitch. Follow that V. There we go. Yarn over, pull it under the stitch. Going over the stitch, yarn over again, pull through 2, 1 and 2. Now I'm going to take this tail end here. Now that we've worked around it for two increases, I think that's probably enough to keep everything locked into place. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull it a little tighter just to make sure the center is tight. And we can cut it. Well, you know what? I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to pull it off to the side just like our other tail end here and just totally ignore it. Now we're not going to work around this tail end for the rest of the stitches for round 2 here, but we still want to do 3 more increases. So we're going to go into the next stitch, and there's 1 single crochet in the next stitch, into the same stitch right there, 2. That's going to be our 4th increase. Next stitch right here will be our 5th increase. There's 1 single crochet, and then in the same stitch, there's our 2nd single crochet. All right, our last stitch is going to be right here, right before that little stitch marker. 2 single crochets. 1, and in the same stitch, 2. Okay. Now that's going to be the end of round 2. And we're going to count our stitches around. You should have 12 stitches. The easiest way to count around, pull that loop out just a little bit. You can find where that V is, and those are the stitches that we're going to count. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to be right there. Then we've got 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. That is going to be our first stitch from round 2, and where we're going to put our crochet hook for round 3 is going to be into that. And before we start round 3 though, let's pull our stitch marker up. So I'm going to take this tail end, pull it over our loop like this. That way it'll keep track of our ends. And we're also going to cut this tail end from the very beginning. We don't need it very long. That's probably just fine. Just to hide it in. It's going to be on the inside anyhow. So we folded our stitch marker over, and now we can continue on to round 3. For round 3, we're going to be doing the following repeat. We're going to start by doing 1 single crochet into our first stitch. So just like normal, we're going to go into our first stitch right here and do a single crochet, just like normal. 1 single crochet. Next, we're going to go into the next stitched over. So this time our increases are separated by a single crochet between increases, which means that our next stitch is an increase. That means that we want to go into the next stitch and put 2 single crochets into that next stitch over. Okay, so kind of like our first round, but instead we have just 1 single crochet between where we have 2 single crochets. So there's our first one right there that we just finished. Our next one's going to go right here, and we're going to put 2 stitches into that one place for an increase. Take our hook, go into that next stitch, yarn over, pull through, and then yarn over and pull through 2. There's going to be our first single crochet. Now we want another one into the same exact stitch, so we're going to follow where this V is into that same stitch and do another single crochet for our second increase of round 3. Or sorry, our first increase of round 3. All right, round 3 is going to be that repeat all the way around. So it's going to be 6 times of that repeat. 1 single crochet, then 1 increase. over and over 6 times to get to the end of the round. That's going to bring your stitch count up from 12, which is what your stitch count was at the end of round 2, up to 18, which is what your stitch count is going to be at the end of round 3, which we're currently on. So that was our first part. Let's do our second one. Single crochet into the next stitch right here. So just 1 single crochet in the next stitch, and then 2 into the stitch after. So 1 in the first, and 2 into this one right here. There's 1, and then in the same stitch will be 2. All right, there's our second repeat. Let's do our third repeat. 1 single crochet, and then 1 increase right here. There's 1, and in the same stitch will be 2. Let's keep going around. 1 single crochet. If you're counting your stitches, you're going to keep doing this until it gets to 18 stitches. There's 1 into that one, and then another one into that. But if you have a stitch marker like this, it's easier to just work our way around. Okay, so 1 single crochet, 1 increase. Don't forget that count. Like once you finish it, okay, great. I did 1 single crochet, 1 increase, and I'm going to keep doing that. Let's do the next one. 1 single crochet in the first. Keep track of this. So there's 1, and then 2 into the next. There's 1, and in the same stitch is 2. Now into the last one right here, we want 1 more repeat. 1 single crochet in the first, and then 1 increase into the next right here. There's 1, and in the same stitch is 2. All right, that's going to be the end of round 3. Now before I continue on to round 4, what I like to do here is mark some stitches. This is going to make it easier for us to sew on the face in a little bit. So what I'm going to take my crochet hook out like this to create a little loop, and we're going to mark where a few of these stitches are with a little bit of yarn in a different color. So I'm going to take a little bit of our cyan yarn here, and we'll just cut it relatively short. That's probably fine. This is just going to be used for marking stitches. I'm going to thread this end onto our needle, and you don't have to do this. Honestly, you can probably get away with not doing this and just finding the stitches later when you add the face, but it does make it a little bit easier when you're adding your face to mark these stitches preemptively. So that way when you add your face, it's just like boom, boom, there it is. So what stitches we want to mark right now are stitches 9, 11, and 14. So we're going to go from where this pink end is. That's going to be stitch number 1, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So that's going to be stitch number 9. So I'm going to come out through the back of stitch number 9 with my needle, like that. And we're going to pull it almost until there's just a little bit of a tail end left over, just like that. Now we want stitch number, so it's 9, 11, and 14. So if that was 9, then 10 and 11 is going to be right here. We're going to go into stitch number 11 like that. And then we want to come out of stitch 14. So that was 11, 12, 13, 14 is going to be right here. We're going to pull it all the way out of stitch 14 like that. Okay, now I like to pull this just enough so there's just a little bit of a tail end, maybe about like that long. And I'm just going to cut this stitch marker pretty close, like that. Now we're just going to ignore those 3 spots, okay? That's just to mark our stitches. We got stitch number 9, stitch number 11, stitch number 14. Okay, we'll just ignore that now. And now we can continue on to round 4. Let's pull our stitch marker up like this. And in round 4, we're going to do the following repeat. Remember how in round 3 we did 1 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 6 times? In round 4, we're going to do 5 single crochets in a row and then an increase. And then we're going to repeat that process 3 times around. So that's going to bring your stitch count up just a little bit more. So we have 18 stitches in round 3. In round 4, we're going to end up with 21 stitches because we're adding 3 stitches because we're doing 3 increases. Okay, so let's just do that one repeat at a time. Let's start with 5 single crochets. So we're going to skip where our stitch marker is right there and do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we can do an increase into this next stitch, meaning 2 single crochets in the same stitch right here. So that's 1 and 2 in that same stitch. Okay, and if you're counting your stitches, that's 5 single crochets to start, and then this increase is going to be stitch number 6 and 7. We're going to repeat that 3 times. So let's do our second repeat. 5 single crochets will be 1, 2. Now we're going to get to this stitch here where we got a stitch marker. Just ignore that as much as you can. In fact, if you can get your crochet hook to kind of have the hook pointed up so you don't accidentally hook onto that stitch, to make sure you get under those loops, and then we can yarn over and then pull it under. So that way we don't accidentally pull that stitch marker out. There we go. So that's 3, 1, 2, and 3. Then 4. Here's another stitch marker. So we're going to see how I accidentally pulled part of that. That's because I didn't do what I just said. So I go into the hook, hook up instead to kind of avoid that stitch marker like that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then an increase into this next stitch right here. 1 and 2 in that same stitch. That'll be stitch number 14. Okay, just a few more. One more repeat here, 5 single crochets, and then 1 increase at that last stitch. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then 1 increase right here. There's 1 and 2 to finish up our round. You should have 21 stitches around, so if you want to count all those stitches around the edges, there should be 21 of them total. All right, that's the end of round 4. Now we can continue on to round 5. We're going to pull our stitch marker up like this, and for round 5, it's really simple. Round 5 is just 1 single crochet into every single stitch around. So there's 21 stitches around, which means you have 21 single crochets to make. You just keep going into each stitch around and try to make sure that there's only 1 single crochet per stitch. So there's 1 and 2 and 3, and we're just going to keep doing that till we have 21. Now I want to quickly show you a few things. The first thing I want to show you is the difference between an increase and a single crochet in our previous rounds. This is just a pro tip for those that are looking to get better at crochet. I'm just going to keep crocheting here just for a few more stitches. There we go. And I'm going to pull my loop out really quick just because I want to show you a pro tip here is we want to look at the difference between a single crochet and a double or an increase in our previous rounds. So if you look at your pieces here, you can kind of see that we have all these little V's. So these V's indicate a single crochet. So that's 1 single crochet there, 1 right there, 1 right there. But if you look further back in your stitches, you're going to find there's some places where there's 2 V's into 1 spot. So this is a regular single crochet. That's 1 V into 1 spot. This is an increase because we have 2 V's going into 1 spot. That's how you can see where your increases are and your single crochets are. This makes it really useful later on to crochet without using a stitch marker like this. You can crochet without using any stitch marker if you just know where your increases are and you keep track of what you're doing in your pieces. So that's just something to note. It's also really important to note that when you want to look back at your piece and find any mistakes, if you count your stitches and you're like, at the end of this round, you're like, I have 22 stitches. I'm only supposed to have 21. That's because you probably did an increase somewhere where you weren't supposed to. What you can do then is look around and find if any of these V's look like there's 2 in 1 space. So like that, you know? And there shouldn't be any of those in this round. So that's just a little pro tip for you. If you like that pro tip, go ahead and give a like down below. All right, let's just keep single crocheting around. We're almost done already with this round. And I actually already lost count of my stitches because, you know, I took that second to talk about that. But I don't need to worry about counting my stitches right now because I know where my end of my round is because of our stitch marker. That's why stitch markers are super important. It helps you crochet without having to count consistently. But if you are counting, you should have 21 stitches by the end of this round, which is going to be right here. All right, that's going to be the end of round 5. Okay, now before we continue on to round 6, it's time where we can start adding our face. So we want to add our face now, and we're going to pull our loop out like this, and we're going to use these stitch markers to indicate where we want to place our face. The first thing we want to do is we want to add our eyes. We're going to add, I'm going to be using our, I think these are 8. They might be 10 millimeter, but I'm pretty sure these are 8 millimeter eyes. And what we want to do is we want to work our eyes into round 3, stitches 9 and 14. Luckily, we've already marked these. That's going to be these 2 stitches on the outside. So this one right there is going to be round 3 stitch 9, and this one right here is going to be around 3 stitch 14. So we want to start by, I'm just going to place it right into that end where that other end is right there. So I'm going to start by placing it into that, and then I'm going to pull this stitch marker out like that, and then we're going to do the same on this side. We're going to place it right into where that end is, like this, and then I'm going to pull it out from the inside like that. We'll keep this one out for just a second though. Okay, so that's going to be how to place the eyes in. Now we want to lock those eyes in place. So we place them in place. Now we can take these little locking mechanisms and kind of fold it out like that. You'll see the little poking bit. Place the end of your locking mechanism on the end of the eye. You can place it this way as well. It actually secures a little bit better if you place it that way, but it's a little harder to do. And I've never have a problem with these eyes coming off. So I like to place the eye part like this because it's a little easier. So I place the end over it. I place my 2 index fingers onto the end and then my thumb on the eye. And I just kind of like push till it makes that little click and gets locked in like that. We'll do another one right here. So lock this eye in place. This, and there we go. Okay, so that's going to be how to add the eyes on. Now the next thing I want to show you before we sew on our muzzle and stuff is going to be how to embroider on just a little bit of white on the outside of the eyes. This is going to be another pro tip, not totally necessary for your piece at all. In fact, if you are a complete beginner, I would suggest probably not doing this and just making the eyes like this right now. But if you want to give something weird a shot, we're going to add some white along the outside of this eye just to make it a little bit cuter. What we want to do for that is just get a little bit, you don't need very much, maybe about that long of white yarn. That's actually way too long, but that's okay. And we're going to thread that onto our needle like this. Okay, so we want the eyes here. Let me show you on a finished one here. We want this white to go on the edges of our eyes, and we're going to just kind of like get it into position, and then we're going to kind of tweak it till we like where it is. So we're going to take this end, and I'm going to start by coming out or going in right next to the eye. So if you kind of like poke the eye out a little bit like that, you'll see this stitch right here. See this one right there? That's right next to the eye. We want to kind of go in the middle of that stitch. So I kind of go into the center of this stitch right here. I just poke right into the bottom like that. I'll poke it into the base, and I just pull my needle out like that. Okay, so there's one end coming out. Now I'm going to thread the other end of our yarn onto our needle. And for this end, I'm going to go directly into where that eye was placed. The easiest way to do that is kind of like pry the eye open like this, and then get my crochet hook under that stitch exactly where that eye went, like that. Perfect. Into the center like this. Okay, now these 2 ends are coming out of the center. I'm going to lock my eye just a little bit tighter because I kind of unlocked it like that, and then I'm going to pull one of these ends. Yeah, that one's good, and I want to kind of tweak it. So first, like, take this slow. First I'm going to take this over because I want it to be a little bit more on this side of the eye, so I'm going to place it over on that side, and then I'm going to pull it tighter really slowly to kind of tighten this up. Okay, like that. See, that's perfect. That's exactly the tightness I like. That's perfect. You just want a little bit on the edge of it. You don't want to mess with it too much. Okay, like that. Now we can double knot these really softly. So we're going to take these 2 tail ends, and I'm just going to knot it first, and I'm going to softly pull it just enough like that. See how it kind of goes around that, kind of goes around the eye part. That's all right. There's one knot. And then I'm going to double knot it like this. Pull it nice and tight. There we go. Now it's double knotted. I'm going to cut it nice and short. Like that. We're going to place that end over there. We're going to use this other tail end in a second. But there is how to make one of those eyes have a little shine to it. Let's do it on the other side now. Thread it onto our needle. Exactly the same way. Hold the face up. Get that eye kind of pried out of the way, and we're going to go into the center of the stitch just to the right of this eye, so right here, right into the center of that stitch like that, and then thread the other end on our needle, and this one's going to go right into the center where we place this eye, I'm gonna pry it open a little bit. Go into that center right like that. Pull it through. Let's tighten that eye up again. And now we want to just pull this enough. Just be very careful with it. Take your sweet time. If you need to redo this, just redo it. Oops, there we go. That's pretty close. I think I can get it just a little bit tighter. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Right? You just want to make it look as similar to the other side as you can. I think that's pretty good. All right, let's double knot these in. Just very delicately. 1 and 2, like that. Okay, we'll cut this nice and short. All right, and that's gonna be how to add our eyes in there. Okay, next up, we wanna sew on our muzzle. So we're gonna take our little muzzle bit, that's gonna be this end that kind of looks like a little heart upside down. And the muzzle's not too tough to sew on actually, especially because we have our little stitch marker. So I'm gonna pull that stitch marker almost all the way out. And let's thread on, there's 2 ends here, you'll see, as we pull it tight, like that. There's gonna be 2 ends. One's coming out a little bit more to the left, one's coming out a little bit more to the right. We're gonna thread on one end and thread on the other end onto the needle. Let's start with this end. Thread that on our needle. And these 2 ends are gonna go into the face around the stitch that's near. So one end goes directly where that stitch is coming out. So that's gonna be right here. That's gonna be the left side. We'll go right into that stitch. I'll pull this stitch marker out now. Pull that one through. Okay, so one end goes through that stitch, and then the other one goes through the next stitch over right here. And we'll thread this end on our needle as well. That. And just pull that one all the way through. Like that. Okay, so with these 2 ends, then we pull this into the face, and then all we need to do is double knot these on the inside. You can do it pretty tight. It doesn't really matter. It won't really mess your piece up. So just tightly double knot that 1 and 2. And then we're going to take our scissors here and cut it nice and short. Okay, now you're noticing probably that one thing about this muzzle is missing. The first thing is that it's kind of loose, right? But the other thing, probably more important, is that there's no nose to the muzzle. So we need to embroider on a little black nose over that. So we're going to thread this end of some black yarn. You don't need very long end of black yarn. That's probably way more than I need. So we'll just thread that onto our needle. And the first one we want to go around that single crochet. So basically the very center of this muzzle. See, there's this one stitch right there. See, just one V. We want to go around that stitch. So I'm going to start by going through the right side of it on this edge, into it, and then into a stitch on the face. The specific stitch that I go into the face, by the way, is right there. I kind of go in the center of that stitch between the eyes. So in the very center of that stitch, it kind of lines up. If you just place the nose into place and then go straight into the body, it lines up pretty well. And then I just pull it in and pull the needle out. And then I'm going to thread the other end of this yarn on my needle again. It's easier just to thread each side and do it individually. And we're going to go on to the next stitch over to the left of where that is, so right here. And then into the body, into the next stitch over, so it's not through the same stitch as the last one. So we want to make sure it's into the adjacent stitch, like that. And then pull it into the body. You don't need to double this up or anything. You just have those 2 ends get pulled in like that. And then we just double knot it on the inside. That's it. That's all you need to do for that muzzle. Okay, you don't need to double knot these too tightly either. You just need it enough to kind of keep that embroidery on. 1 and 2 for a double knot. And we'll cut the yarn nice and short and throw these tail ends off to the side, which we'll use later for stuffing. All right, and that's going to be how to sew on our muzzle. You can see we've got our face all made up there. We got our eyes, and I love how the eyes are kind of just barely under the muzzle. It makes it look so cute, right? All right, looking pretty good. Let's continue on, and we can continue on now to round 6. For round 6, we're going to start by pulling our stitch marker up, And round 6 actually pretty easy. All we're gonna need to do for round 6 is do 2 single crochets and then an increase, and then finish up by doing 18 more single crochets around. Now currently we have 21 stitches around, but because we're adding 1 increase into round 6, we're going to end this round up with 22 stitches around. So we're gonna start by doing, right after where our magic or our stitch marker is, we're gonna go into that stitch. We're gonna start by doing 2 single crochets. So there's 1 and 2. Next, we're going to do an increase into the next stitch right here. So that means 2 in the same stitch. That's 1. And in the same stitch is 2. Again, look, you can see that 1 V on the last one and then 2 in the next because we're making an increase. And we're going to finish this round up by doing 18 more single crochets. So just single crochets all the way until we get to the end of our round. All right, last one's going to be right here. There we go. Now you should have 21 stitches around, and that'll be the end of round 6. Now before we continue on to round 7 though, I do want to create another little spot for a stitch marker, and this is going to be used for adding the the fins. So it's kind of easier just to do this right now as well. So what I like to do here is we actually want a longer end this time. So I'm going to do like kind of that long of a stitch marker. And I'm going to start by threading this end onto our needle. And we want to mark stitches number 11 and stitches number 19. And again, this is something that you don't really need to do. You can just kind of like eye it later on when we're sewing on the fins, but it makes it just a little bit easier later on. So stitches 11 and 19, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this stitch right here, I'm going to come out through the back of it like that. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to come out through the top of it like that. There we go. And we'll pull it almost all the way through so there's just a little bit left over. And then we want stitch number 19. So if that was 11, we got 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. 19 is going to be right here. And this time I'm going to come out through the back of it like this, like that. And see this long end on the inside? Just let it be really loose. Like loose, loose, loose. Make it go over the eyes. It does not matter. We just don't want to accidentally work around that as we're working our next round. So just let it be loose. And we'll cut this end like, we'll go like that long because we're going to need that little end as well. Look, he's got little arms, little noodles for arms. All right, so that's going to be those 2 stitches that we want to mark. We're just going to ignore those as we work our next round. Now notice also, see the eye? It's kind of messed up my little eye there. So if that ever happens, just go into the back of it like that and just kind of pry that out like this. Once you have it stuffed up, that shouldn't happen, but as we're messing with the inside, sometimes it gets pulled in. Okay, let's continue on now to round 7. All right, for round 7, pull our stitch marker up. We're going to do 2 single crochets and then an increase. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet and then another increase. And then we're going to finish this round up by doing 17 single crochets to get to the end of the round. So we're going to start by doing 2 single crochets. Stitch marker pulled up. There's 1 and 2. And then we'll do an increase into the next stitch right here. So 2 in the same stitch. 1 and 2, like that. After that increase, we want 1 single crochet right here. And then after that single crochet, we want 1 more increase right here. 1 and 2 in the same stitch. All right, to the end of this round, we want 17 more single crochets to get to the end of the round, and we want to avoid this on the inside and avoid these tail ends on the outside. So we're just going to keep going around. We want 17 single crochets all the way till we get to the end of the round. Here, let me get just to this stitch marker real quick. There we go. And just avoid that stitch marker by pulling it under and make sure that the hook is pointed up like that, just to avoid it. And I'll just keep crocheting all the way around until I get to the end of the round. Okay, really quick. I'm pretty sure people are going to skip this part of the video because it's just single crochets and most people skip that. But I want to do a secret giveaway right now. So if you're watching this part of the video, let me know in the comments by commenting with a fish emoji. If you comment with a fish emoji, I'm going to choose one person at random in a few weeks, and that person's going to win a free membership to the website Club Crochet. which means you'll get a bunch of free patterns and stuff. So if you want to enter that giveaway, just comment down below with a little fish icon and obviously hit the little subscribe button. I'll comment and reply to that comment later on, so make sure to check your email to see if you get any replies to that comment. Okay, now keep it between us. Don't say anything about the giveaway in the comment, by the way. Just comment with that emoji and I'll know if you entered. Okay, now let's get back to this and pretend we didn't say anything. Secret giveaway. All right, and that's going to be the last stitch for round 7. You should have 24 stitches around by the end of that round. And before I go and continue on to round 8, we do want to mark one stitch in this round, and that's going to be stitch number 5. So I'm going to pull that loop out, and I'm just going to use, we'll just use the little bit of this right there like that. And we're just going to mark stitch number 5. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to be this stitch right there. That's going to be where the tail gets sewn on. So I'm just going to pull that through just like that. And we're just going to ignore that and let it sit there. And continue on now to round 8. For round 8, we're going to be doing a new stitch called the invisible decrease in this round. So we're going to start by doing 2 single crochets to get into position. Let's pull our stitch marker from the tail for this pink up like that. We're going to do 2 single crochets. So that's going to be starting right here. Will be 1 and 2 is going to be right there. Next, we're going to do an invisible decrease. For an invisible decrease, remember how I said way early on in this pattern that the difference between single crochets, if you go under both loops like that, like we've been doing, that's how you normally do stitches. But for an invisible decrease, we're only going to utilize the front loops of the stitches. So only using the 2 front loops of the next 2 stitches, and we want to work our crochet hook into those 2 front loops simultaneously like that, and then do a single crochet. It's called an invisible decrease. It's my favorite way to decrease, but there are other ways to decrease, some of which are just slightly easier than this. If you want to learn about other ways to decrease, check out my video up here or in the description, or at clubcrochet.com/decrease. But this is going to be my favorite way. It's called the invisible decrease. It's called that because it's really hard to see in your stitches, which makes it really clean for a final piece. All right, so for an invisible decrease, we're going to take our crochet hook, and this time we're going to go only into that front loop. So only in the loop closest to you. Easiest way to do that is take our crochet hook, point up from the bottom, and poke only through that first one like that. Once you're into that first front loop, you can twist your crochet hook around to get into position under that next front loop like that, and poke straight up through that other one. So now see how I'm under 2 front loops at the same time? Now we want to do a single crochet into those front loops. We yarn over our crochet hook and pull under those 2 front loops. Easiest way, twist the yarn and scoop it under like that to get through. Now once you've pulled through those 2 front loops, you have 2 loops on the hook. We can yarn over again and pull through those 2 loops, 1 and 2, to finish up our invisible decrease. Okay, so that's 2 single crochets, 1 invisible decrease. Next, we're going to do another single crochet after that, right where the stitch marker is. So we're going to do 1 single crochet into that stitch, and then another invisible decrease. So we'll go a little bit faster now. Front loop only, like that. Then the next front loop only, like that. And then we're going to single crochet into those. Yarn over, pull under 1, pull under 2, and single crochet. Here we go. All right, so that's going to be the 2 invisible decreases. Next, we're going to finish this round up by doing 17 more single crochets. So we're going to just keep single crocheting all the way until we get to the end of this round. By the way, here's a little fact about seals. Did you know that the difference between seals and sea lions, obviously they are very closely related, but seals are a little bit different. The first thing is that sea lions, which I'm more used to seeing here in California, have little ears, actually. So sea lions have little tiny ear flaps. The other thing that is a big difference between seals and sea lions is that sea lions can actually pull their back fins forward to make them more of like feet, so they can kind of walk a little bit easier. Whereas seals, what we're currently making, have their fins pointed backwards towards the back, which means that they kind of like flop their way up onto land. So they're much more used to being in the ocean than on land. Just a cool little fact. All right, so that's going to be the end of round 8 there. We'll pull our stitch marker up like this, and now we can continue on to round 9. For round 9, we're going to be making a lot more decreases now. It's going to be 2 different repeats split up in this round. The first one is going to be 2 single crochets and then an invisible decrease. We want to repeat that 2 times. So it's going to be 1, 2, invisible decrease, 1, 2, invisible decrease. Then after you do those 2 decreases, we're going to do 5 single crochets and then an invisible decrease 2 times. So that's, again, that's 1, 2, decrease, 1, 2, decrease, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, decrease, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, decrease to finish up the round. Let's go ahead and do that. Stitch marker up, start with 2 single crochets, 1 and 2, and then invisible decrease, front loop, and then a single, and then do that 2 times. Let's do another one. 1, 2, and then another invisible decrease. So there's 2 single crochets, decrease, 2 single crochets, decrease. Now 5 single crochets and then a decrease. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then our invisible decrease. Front loop only, single crochet. There we go. And then another 5 and then another decrease. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and then our next and last invisible decrease right there. And there we go. That's to pull your stitch count down. So by the way, for the end of round 8, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but end of round 8, you should have 22 stitches around. Whereas at the end of round 9, which we just finished, you should have 18 stitches. So there should be 18 stitches if you want to count all the way around for this round. Okay, one more round and then we can start sewing on the tail and fins. Oh, I'm sorry, wait, I'm sorry. We do need to also mark some stitches here. We were actually supposed to mark these in round 8. So let me go ahead and pull that out a little bit here. And that's going to be that stitch right there and this stitch right here, the other stitches for the fins. So if we want to go back to round 8, that's going to be the round above this right here. We're going to count our stitches up. We're going to do, we want to mark stitches 10 and 20 in that last round. So let's go up here. And this is going to be stitch number 1. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So it's going to actually be, if you wanted to count up from where this end is, it goes up 2 stitches and over 1. Right there is going to be stitch number 10. Go ahead and thread that in and pull it through. Okay, because we want to keep track of where that is. Then we want to count stitch number 20. So that's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So 20 is going to be right here. So similarly as the last one, you want to count your stitches up, 2 rounds up, 1, 2, 1 round over to the left this time for our other stitch marker right there. Just pull that in like that. Okay, and that's going to be marking those rounds up so you can keep track of where those fins, that's where the fins are going to be sewn on. And back here is going to be where the tail is sewn on. Okay, so now we are on round 10, our final round before we sew on our fins. So we're going to pull our stitch marker up here. And for round 10, we're going to do 1 single crochet into the first stitch, like that, and then 1 invisible decrease in the next. Again, an invisible decrease was front loop only, then front loop only, and single crochet. We're going to repeat that process 6 times total. That's going to bring your stitch count down from 18, which is our current stitch count, down to 12 stitches around. Again, that's going to be 1 single crochet in the first, 1 invisible decrease in the next, 6 times in a row. Let's do our second repeat. 1 single crochet, and then 1 invisible decrease, front loop, and then a single crochet. 1 single crochet, 1 invisible decrease, single crochet, invisible decrease. We'll just keep doing that all the way around. It should be 6 of those decreases total, and you should end up being only at 12 stitches by the end of this round. 1 single, and last one is an invisible decrease. Okay, hopefully I didn't go too quickly there. All right, we'll pull our stitch marker up there. I'm going to pull my loop all the way out because now we're going to sew on the body, sew on the little body pieces. We're going to start by sewing on the tail. So let's take our little tail, which looks like this. And the tail is actually the easiest one for me to sew on. we actually don't technically need a needle for this. What we want to do is we want to pull the tail. You know what, let's use a needle because it's a little easier, but you can use a crochet hook by just going into the body and pulling loops out. Now the tail is going to be split into two parts. We got two tail ends here. The right one side here is going to come through where this stitch marker is, and then the other one is going to come through just over to the left of where that stitch marker is. Okay, so that's where those two tail ends are, and then we're going to double knot them on the inside. Let's start by doing the one where the stitch marker is. I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out now that my needle is in place. And then once my needle is in the spot, then I thread the yarn onto the needle. It just makes it a little easier because it kind of like holds the needle in place as you thread it. And we're just going to pull that on the inside. And then the next one over is going to go one stitch over right here. We'll thread this end on our needle. That. And I'm going to pull this end in as well. There we go. Now I can just pull these two ends and it'll pull that tail onto the piece. Now to make sure this is really secure, what you want to do is you kind of undo your piece a little bit. See how the inside here? You want to pull these tight enough just so that the knots get pulled in. So we want to pull it just tight enough. See that little knot there? That's what we want. We want the knot to be pulled in. It's going to make sure that tail is sewn on really tightly so it never comes off. Okay, so there's those two tail ends. We're going to double knot those on the inside. There's one and two for a double knot. And we'll cut that nice and short, just like that. Fold it inside out, and there is our tail sewn on, nice and easy. Easy squeezy, taily peasy. Perfect. All right, next let's sew on our fins. Now we have two fins here, and both of these fins are going to be sewn on where our stitch markers are, but we want them in two different ways. Now you kind of can choose how you want your fins to curve here. You can either have them curving up, which is the way I like it. I like to curve them like this. Or you can have them curving down like that, which also totally works. It kind of makes them look like they're holding the bottom of their belly a little bit more. But I really like it curved up because, I don't know, I just think it's really cute. So I'm going to start by threading in the top of our curve. And as you can probably imagine, the top part is going to be sewn on in the top part of where this stitch marker is. So we're going to go into that stitch marker there. That. And one into this other stitch marker here on the bottom. We want the bottom of our tail. Like that. Just pull that on the inside. Like this. And now once I have those two tail ends on the inside, and you can kind of see them being propped out here, so I can pull these tight, I can then grab our little, there we go, grab our little stitch marker here, and we'll just pull this part out to get rid of the stitch marker on the side that we're currently sewing on. And then we can take these two tail ends here, and just like how we did our tail, we want to make sure that the knots of these ends get pulled on the inside. So see that little knot right there? Boom, see? Little knot. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. There, I could feel it. Yeah, there's the knot, and then just double knot these on the inside. You can do this part pretty tight, actually. Like that. You don't really have to cut these ends, actually. You can kind of stuff them into the piece right now, but we'll just cut them to make it easier. Stuff it out, and look, he's got this little like, hi. But if you fold it in like this, it'll stay inwards instead, like that. Pretty nice. Let's do the same on the opposite end. I like that curve, so we want that top curve first. And we'll put that one into that top stitch, like that. And then the bottom curve into that bottom stitch. This. Oops. There we go. Pull those in. Let's get rid of that stitch marker. We're actually totally done with this stitch marker. Oops. We kind of like threaded the end of that. See, we kind of went into the stitch marker itself. So I'm just going to peel it out like that. Might need to cut it out. Ah, there we go. We'll use those. We'll use it for stuffing later on. And just like the first one, we're going to pull these knots just tight enough so that the knots themselves get pulled on the inside. Make sure it's in the position we want. There we go. Pull those 2 knots on the inside and we'll just double knot them. There's 1 and 2. Okay, cut those relatively short and then fold it in. And there we go. We've got our little fin sewn on, and you can see our character's pretty much just about done. We just have a few more rounds to go, and then we can stuff and sew it closed. Speaking of, before we get to those our very last round in our piece, let's stuff our piece up with all of our extra threads. So this is the part where I just like to use these extra threads if I can, just so I don't have to, you know, it saves us on stuffing a little bit, but it also saves us on waste, so we don't have too much waste. So I'm going to use all these little ends from all of our parts of our piece, which ends up actually being a decent amount of stuffing. You know, I kind of like roll it up, and then I just throw it right into the center of our piece, just like that. Okay. All right, so that's sewing it all together, stuffing it mostly, and now we have one final round of crochet. Let's get our crochet hook into our piece. Like that. There we go. And for our last round, round 11, we just want to do an invisible decrease for every single stitch around. So just decreasing all the way around. Pull our stitch marker up there. Our next stitch is right here. Now this round's gonna kind of be tough actually. It's just like hard to like hold your piece and get the stitch hook in there, but just take it one stitch at a time. 1 invisible decrease, 6 invisible decreases total, but 1 for each stitch around. So up through the front loop, then the next one right here. So there's 1, 2, and then our single crochet into that first, for our first invisible decrease. So there's 1, next stitch will be right here, up 1, up 2, and there we go. Here's our third one. We want 6 of these total. Here's 3. Here's 4. Just a couple more. And this will be our 5th one. All right, last one right here. Front loop only, and single crochet. There we go. We can cut our yarn now. You don't need a very long end. This is just going to be for sewing it closed in just a second. And then just pull that all the way through. You should have 6 stitches around, by the way. So if we want to count our stitches, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't worry about that. We're going to look at that a little bit more in a second as well. Let's pull our stitch marker all the way out. The easiest way to get rid of a stitch marker when you're using yarn like this is actually just pull it. Just make sure you pull it with the lines, and it should pull them all the way out like that. Okay. And we can use this for stuffing as well. All right, now we want to stuff it fully. I like to use, obviously, some real stuffing now. And you can use the back of your crochet hook. It works really well. But another way to do this is with a pencil, which I can't seem to find. So we're just going to use this little stick instead. I actually find that wood sticks are really, really nice for stuffing up pieces because it holds onto the stuffing really well. This is the way I like to stuff. I like to take my little stick here or a pencil or the back of a crochet hook, and I kind of grab it and then stuff it. Grab it, stuff it like that. And as you go, you'll start to see that the fibers, and then as I do it, I like kind of push the fibers with my thumb into the position for stuffing. Like that. And I'm going to try to get that pink yarn in as well. You just want to get as much stuffing as you want on the inside. And knowing how much stuffing you need is kind of comes with practice, but my rule of thumb is usually, it depends on the piece that I'm making, but usually it's if I squish it in and it holds that shape like that, that's not enough stuffing. That's usually the way I like to do it, but it's really easy to stuff it too much by accident. So just be careful not to stuff it too much. And you'll know when you're stuffing it too much because the stuffing, you'll start to see the stuffing through the stitches actually. Okay, so I actually think this might be pushing it right here. I'm getting close to too much stuffing. You do not obviously need very much stuffing for a piece this tiny. Okay, I think this is too much, so I'm gonna pull some of that out and just get the rest of this on the inside. It's a good opportunity if you want to add like a little squeaker or something fun. Sometimes I add little magnets into my pieces, especially my birds, so that they can perch on metal pieces. But in this case, we're just gonna stuff it up. All right, that's pretty good. I like that. It's got a nice firm stuffing to it. Arms are where we want it to be. Eyes look good. Perfect. Okay. The last piece to the puzzle, sew it closed. Now, sewing closed is actually not too crazy. This is a fun little technique. Thread your end on a needle. And what we want to do is you just want to take this needle and go through the front loops only of all the last stitches in the final round. So we're going to go into the next stitch over right here, only into the front loop closest to you. And just pull it through. There's one. There should be 6 of these. 2. Notice how I kind of pull it off to the side as I do this. So I pull it through, and I pull it off to the side to make it easier to get into the next one. Boom, off to the side. That was 4. This will be 5. One more. We're losing our yarn. There we go. Last one's going to be right here. Okay, so through all those, and then you can pull it nice and tight, and it should close that end up. And then you want to take the needle, go straight into the center, and then out somewhere along the back. Doesn't really matter. This is just going to be for hiding the end. And just pull it all the way through. You want to pull it tight enough to close that bottom up, just like that. And then we can cut the yarn nice and close and squish it to make that end go in. And then I always like to kind of mess with my stitches to make sure everything looks right. Make sure the nose looks right. Oh, that's so cute though, right? Oh my gosh, that's too cute. Wow. And that's how to crochet a little tiny seal. It is from the top. There's a bottom. So cute. Thank you so much for crocheting this pattern along with me. I hope you enjoyed making it as much as I enjoyed designing it. And this one was a really fun one to design. I thought there's a lot of like new techniques I used, like using the stitch markers and how we did the eyes and stuff that I really am proud of. And I think I'm gonna use in more patterns in the future. Now, like I said, if you want to check out more of our series of patterns, like making a little beach ball that goes on their little head, or making a sand castle, or some little hermit crabs, or a little seagull that actually turns into a little bird. These are all part of my new series called Amigurumi, which you can find linked in the description or at clubcrochet.com/Sandy. And like I promised in the intro, I will reveal a little secret pattern that is coming soon. Now, I actually just finished the rough draft last night, so I'm gonna be looking for testers very soon, but it's coming soon as an addition to this pattern is a sea lion. Look at that big old honking sea lion. Basically, I wanted a more advanced pattern that was kind of like fun with our beginner one, but a little different. So I thought, let's make a sea lion. We'll use some new advanced techniques in it. You can learn new stuff in it, and it'll be much bigger, and we can use all the yarn from our materials from our kit. So if you are interested in helping me test this pattern out, all you need to do is check out the link in the description or comment down below. Like I'll have a link in the comments down below. I'm looking for testers for this, and I'll be reaching out about testers very soon. So if you are interested in testing this out, please reach out down below. And if you're interested in any of these patterns, all you need to do is like down below, subscribe to the channel, and hit the little bell icon so you don't miss it when we come out with new videos. There's going to be a new video coming out soon for our little hermit crabs and a bunch of other tutorials that come out all the time, as well as live crochet alongs. All right, well, thank you so much again for watching. Pasta la pizza, happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next time. Bye! Goodbye. Oh, goodbye.